Many of us grew up thinking that morality and principles are things for suckers. Principles are things that get in the way of having fun. Sure, religion or our grandmother told us that we need principles, but at the end of the day, to succeed in life, you have to compromise. Maybe you have to make sure that others will like you, or you will force them at least to fear you. And you should be quite flexible with principles. As comedian Groucho Marx put it, those are my principles. And if you don't like them, I have others. In short, the message has always been, just be practical. Right? Wrong, says Ayn Rand. The most controversial philosopher of the 20th century considered principles not as a luxury, but as a necessary tool for success in life. For Ayn Rand, being principled means being self-interested. You do yourself a favor when you have principles. It's like you take your vitamins in the morning. Having principles and strengthening them is something that will be good for your life. Now, what does she mean by principles? She means having some general truths that you have figured out that apply in situations in life. For example, be honest, don't compromise your standards, go after the things you like, don't give up a higher value for a lower value, and things like that. She characterizes principles as a map. In the same way that to go somewhere you need a map, equally, to succeed in life, you need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. Therefore, she's opposed to those people who say, I don't have principles, I'm just practical. Actually, she thinks these people are morons and these people are self-destructive. There is nothing as impractical as a so-called practical man, says Ayn Rand. And she continues. His view of practicality can best be illustrated as follows. If you want to drive from New York to Los Angeles, it is impractical and idealistic to consult a map and to select the best way to get there. You will get there much faster if you just start out driving at random, turning or cutting any corner, taking any road in any direction, following nothing but the mood and the weather of the moment. So for Ayn Rand, principles are a necessity. Principles are a tool that is essential for getting somewhere in life. And this is why one of the main virtues that she considers someone needs to have is integrity, which in simple terms means sticking to your principles, particularly when it is difficult to do so. Now, Ayn Rand did not just theorize about principles. She has shown us how principles operate in action. Her principles materialize in her fictional heroes. Her heroes are walking embodiments of these principles. And when we talk about integrity, one figure comes to mind, Howard Roark. Howard Roark is the fictional hero in Rand's novel The Fountainhead. We meet Howard Roark when he's quite young, in his early 20s, and he's chasing his one big dream in life. He wants to become an architect, but he wants to build his own way. Howard Roark wants to build based on his own standards. Early in the novel, we see him explaining to the dean of the architecture school that has expelled him because his ideas are too radical. He explains to him what are his principles on architecture. He explains that a building needs to have integrity, just like a human being. It needs to be based on an idea. It needs to be based on a key theme. Roark says, nothing can be reasonable or beautiful unless it's made by one central idea, and the idea sets every detail. A building is alive, like a man. Its integrity is to follow its own truth, its one single theme, and to serve its own single purpose. Roark wants to build buildings his way, or he doesn't want to build buildings at all. He wants to make the world more beautiful though, based on his own standards. Roark is then a maverick. He's a radical, he's an innovator. But he lives in a society where most people are just what Ayn Rand called second-handers. They are followers. And in a world where architects just copy each other and they reproduce whatever has been given to them by the quote authorities and the consensus of the profession. Of course, we expect that Howard Roark will struggle in such a world. But he's not struggling alone. He's struggling armed with his principles. And he knows he can succeed. But notice, success for Howard Roark is not to win the approval of polite society. He doesn't want to see himself in the front page of magazines or something like that. Success for Roark is to build his way. You know the song I Did It My Way? This could be the soundtrack of the life of Howard Roark. And where is he going to find clients? He expects that in the same way as he has his own standards, there are people out there, what he calls his kind of people, who will see through their own eyes and they will appreciate his buildings. And these are exactly the people he wants to work with. These are the people he wants to have as clients. These are the people he wants to have as co-workers. People who also have their own standards, their own, at the end of the day, principles. But there is one particular moment in Roark's life where his principles will be put to the test. It's a challenge which is so big that many would be tempted to say, just for now, just for this once, I'm going to let go of my principles. Just for this once, I'm going to compromise. We are early in Howard Roark's career. He has built a few buildings, but his radicalism is too much to handle for many people. So he's running low of money, he's behind on his bills, and he has even to pawn his watch. He's at a low point, yet he's facing a big opportunity. He's making a bid for a grand commission for the headquarters of a big bank. And just as he gets to the point of being literally penniless, he hears back from the board that his plan has been accepted. Now, this would totally make his career. He would have a huge building at the center of New York. Yet there is one condition the board of the bank tells him. He'll just have to make some small changes. He'll just have to make some compromises. Some changes that would make his building an ugly building. A building without a central idea. And remember, for Howard Roark, every building has integrity. It needs to follow a central idea. It needs to follow some principles. So there are two roads ahead for Howard Roark. The one is to compromise, to accept the commission with the changes. So his building would not be anymore entirely his building. The central idea would have his radicalism, his vision, and then it would have many changes. Changes that in his eyes would make it ugly. Or he will have to say no to the commission. And this means that, at least for the time being, he will have to close his office because he's run out of money, and he will have to do something else. Go back into being a day laborer, go back into being a proletariat. And what does Roark do? He declines the commission. And there's a very interesting dialogue there. Someone from the board of the bank who likes him, he asks something like, why do you have to be so fanatic? Why do you have to be so selfless? Which means, why do you have to sacrifice for your principles and your ideals? And Roark gives the most memorable answer. For me, this is the biggest moment in the book. Howard Roark says, that was the most selfish thing you have ever seen a man do. That was the most selfish thing you have ever seen a man do. What happens next is that Howard Roark indeed closes his office and goes to work in a granite quarry. This is a job which is one of the most difficult jobs under the scorching sun, manual labor. So someone would say, what do you mean this is a selfish decision? It was not selfish. You sacrificed for some abstract ideals and now you are a manual laborer. But is that so? Did Roark indeed sacrifice? Now let us imagine that Roark would have taken the easy way. He would have compromised. Let's see how this would play out. If Roark would build an ugly building, a building not based on his standards, he would basically not anymore be an architect. Remember, Roark does not just want to build any buildings. He wants to build buildings his way. He wants to build buildings based on his principle. So sure, he would have money, but he would lose his self-esteem. He would lose his self-respect. Every day he would pass from that point in New York, he would see that building and I said, this is me betraying who I am. This is me betraying the vision with which I started. This is me betraying my dream. This is me betraying Howard Roark. A secondary effect of Roark's betrayal to himself would be that the people that he envisioned that would be his kind of people, the people that he would want to work with, they would see that building and they would say, this architect is probably one of the many. And this doesn't mean that Roark expects the approval of others, but this means that he would eventually not be successful in his own way. He would just be one of the many architects who copy each other or who do whatever ugly thing is asked from them. So what happens later in the Fountainhead? Roark, because he decided not to take the easy way, he hasn't got this stain in his consciousness and in his resume, and eventually his kind of people find him, they reach out to him, so he comes back from the quarry and he starts building again. Initially, he doesn't build very fancy buildings at the center of New York, but again, it doesn't matter. He builds his own way. He does it his way. And this is success for Howard Roark. So here's a key takeaway. Life is a long game. Life is a marathon. And this is why you need principles. Because with principles, you project in the future and they give you guidance on how to act. Not act based on what you feel like doing on the moment, but act based on what are your goals, what are your visions. So again, they are very, in a good way, selfish tools. When you follow your principles, you do a big favor to yourself. And here's a hot take. I would say even if Roark did not end up being a great architect, as eventually happens in the book, he would still be happier at the quarry, being loyal to the vision that he began with, rather than if he was just someone who sold his soul to build crappy stuff to be great in the eyes of others. A great man or a great woman doesn't care about how they look in the eyes of others. They care about, am I loyal to my standards? Am I loyal to my values? Am I loyal to my ideas? So Howard Roark, even in the quarry, I'm sure at night he would sleep like a baby. His mind, his consciousness would be clear. And again, turns out he succeeds because principles are not just for idealists and martyrs. Principles are the key to a successful life and to a successful career. And one last question is, how can you stand up for your principles? Because what Roark did is difficult. What Roark did is something that takes a lot of courage. Well, here's how you do it. Make sure that your principles are actually yours. If you believe in them, if you have reached them based on your own standards and based on effort, not based on whatever you found ready-made out there or based on whatever trend you want to imitate. If you reach them your own way, then it will be easier to stick to these principles. So here is the formula at the end of the day. Independence, which means using your own mind to form your own principles, plus integrity, which is sticking to your principles when it is difficult to do so, equals courage. Thank you for watching.